You'll be happy to know I numbered my notes today. Yeah, or maybe not. Maybe you showed up last week for the first time and you're like, man, this guy's a wild card. I want to see what happens next, whatever it is. Glad you're here. We in conflict, especially in the aftermath of conflict, we do some stuff. Like when conflict is over, but it's still kind of brewing inside of you. You're not yelling anymore, but you're in the aftermath. We do something. We build nice big walls to protect ourselves. Say, hey, you will never hurt me again like this. We might even have a moat and a drawbridge just because it looks kind of cool. We want to guard ourselves. We put archers on the strong tower, making sure they can shoot down and protect us. We isolate with intent. We say, I will never be hurt like that again. And we let it fester and we let it grow. And we do this in our marriages, in our parenting, in our friendships, in our church, in the office space. We isolate and we hold that resentment. We hold that bitter grudge that says, hey, you'll never do this to me again because I've got a ledger holding account of all the things and all the ways that you have done me wrong. And I won't let it happen again. Here's the problem with building walls is they might protect you from harm, but they also prevent hugs. They prevent deeper relationship. They prevent your opportunity for growing and pressing in together. And they also prevent your opportunity from building trust back because you're so distant and so far away that you can't quite get a grip on what is good. See, if we are going to handle conflict biblically in the way that God has called us to, it might look a whole lot less like wall building and more like pressing in together. And here's what we need to know, because you might be like, Josh, that sounds risky. Like that sounds great in concept, except they cause me harm. Like why should I navigate this relationship still? Why should I love them still when they continue to hurt me in response? Here's the deal. Resentments don't change them, but forgiveness frees you. You don't have any control over them. You're not holding chains on their wrists. They're not shackled down. In fact, what I heard today in worship, I just kept praying over this, like, let us be an unshackled people that are not bound down by our resentments, but are freed up to follow Jesus in every place he calls us to. And sometimes he's going to call you to that relationship. Sometimes he's going to call you away from that relationship, but all the while you're meant to be free from resentment, moving forward in forgiveness, responding to what you have already received. If you have your Bibles, I want to invite you to open up to Matthew chapter 18. And while you get there, we have been in a series, and we're concluding a series called How to Fight. And when I say concluding, that maybe I should put some like air quotes around that because we're not really concluding. It's more like, hey, now it's time to get the reps in. Like now it's time to put this into practice. If there's one thing that I've seen, I even had a conversation with my wife, Jenny, the other day. I said, man, like all these conflict conversations keep coming up in the middle of this series. And I was like, am I just doing a bad job communicating how to handle this? And what that led to was a discussion of how we just have this tendency to bury it and to let it fester and to let the conflict grow and grow and grow till it becomes a mound that we continually trip over, but we just call it normal. All the while, we're meant to be a free people. We don't trip on the mat. We walk towards each other in relationship. We don't trip on the struggle or trip on our chains. We let ourselves go because those who are free in the Son named Jesus is free indeed, like you and I. We're not meant to be bound by the resentments we hold on to. And this conflict conversation, hopefully, is a chance for us to start getting in the reps. To say, hey, I'm going to get my side of the road clear. And we say, but they started it, but they hurt me. It doesn't matter. That's not the point. The point is that you do your part. The point is that you are faithful, that Jesus was faithful first, and his faithfulness is not tied to our faithfulness, which means that my faithfulness shouldn't be tied to yours. Like I'm meant to follow Jesus no matter what. You're meant to follow Jesus no matter what. Why do we give others the authority to speak into that journey? So then in Matthew 18, where it picks up, Peter asks a really important question. He frames it for us in a really beautiful way of how do we respond to the conflict, especially in the aftermath. It says, then Peter came to Jesus and asked, Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Up to 7 times? And at this point, I'm sure Peter thinks he's crushing it. He's like, up to 7 times. Like that's awesome. Like Jewish culture would say, if you forgive 3 times, you're being generous. And Peter's probably like, well, I know that Jesus likes to go above and beyond. And so, you know what, I'll more than double it. In fact, 7 is the number for perfection. Like that means it's complete. And so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to choose that one. And so he goes, hey, up to 7 times, Lord? And he probably thinks he has one. And then Jesus does what Jesus does. He responds and he says, I tell you not 7 times, but 77 times. And what he's saying here, see, 7 is the number for perfection. And when you put another 7 on top of that, 77, that's not just perfection, that's ongoing perfection. He's saying, hey, this is forgiveness without limits. Your brother, your sister, they sin against you, and you forgive them. And then they sin again, 77, 87, however many times they sin, it doesn't matter. Forgiveness isn't tied to their faithfulness. It's tied to what you've already received, which means that you and I aren't meant to have a limit to it. So Jesus is first saying that, but he's also doing something different. He's pointing to the parallel between how the kingdom of Jesus is meant to be versus the kingdom of the world. See, Jesus leads an upside-down kingdom. Everything that the world thinks is right and good, Jesus flips upside down and says, you're missing it. That's why it's called 180 life, because we're meant to not just have the 180 destination of heaven and out. We're meant to have the 180 life transformed, changed, and for the good of the kingdom right now, living on mission, making and sending disciples who love and live like Jesus. That's what it looks like. And we're a part of this upside-down kingdom that Jesus leads out. And here's how he's pointing to that. It's so I learned this week. It got me a little amped up. See, in Genesis chapter 4, verse 23, this is what Jesus is pointing to. You've got this guy named Lamech. It said, Lamech said to his wives, Ada and Zillah, listen to me, wives of Lamech. You know it's a good start when he starts talking about himself in third person? It's like, hey, listen to me, wives of Lamech, wives of me. Hear my words. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for injuring me. If Cain avenged 7 times, then Lamech 77 times. So Jesus is pointing back to this. He's saying, hey, no, you want vengeance. The world says avenge. The world says justice. And God says, hold on, justice is mine. It's not yours. And Jesus says, no, you're not called to avenge. You're called to forgive. Where Lamech represents the world, where Cain represents the culture of the world, Jesus says, I've got an upside-down kingdom, and I'm inviting you into it. It's very different, and you're called to forgive. Why? Because forgiveness frees you. Doesn't free them. It doesn't even really impact them very much, but it frees the chains of resentment that are carried on your own wrists. I do want to clarify something as we dive in, because there is a difference here that we get a little bit confused about. Forgiveness is not the same thing as trust. Now, there is a tying together when you bring relationship into the picture, but forgiveness and trust are not the same thing. Here's the deal. If your son constantly steals your wallet, you are called to forgive him, but that doesn't mean you're meant to keep leaving the wallet on the counter. Forgiveness and trust are not the same thing. In fact, if you seek forgiveness and expect trust in return, that's incredibly manipulative. Like, trust is earned over time. It's built. In fact, Scripture would say that we are meant to forgive everybody, but we're meant to trust God. Now, should we grow in trust with the people around us? Absolutely. But the only person who gets every ounce of your trust, or at least is supposed to, is God alone. Like, he's the only one who knows every part of you. And you go, but my spouse knows me. I love her so much. Well, yeah, you do. That's great, but she doesn't know everything. She doesn't know that weird thought that you had the other day. You keep that to yourself. That's between you and God, and he forgave you for it. Like, God is the one we're meant to trust. It's not the same. See, if forgiveness is the canceling of a debt, trust is deciding if the accounts remain open. Trust is saying, hey, but you know what? I'm going to allow you to continue making withdrawals. Trust might mean you maintain the relationship and help them build that trust back. Sometimes it means stepping away from the relationship. It's not saying that it's the same. It's saying that forgiveness is a heart posture, and you and I are meant to have it. Where we say the debt is canceled. It is paid in full. And forgiveness is meant to be, and it's not for me, it's meant to be an immediate response. Like, that's, if I am like someday after I'm out of this body and I'm in the presence of the King of the universe, like, forgiveness will be an immediate response, and I probably won't even need it anymore. And yet, right now, you and I are called to forgive not just that person, but every person around you. That person that you like, man, you're just like, I could never. That person is who you're supposed to forgive. And it's meant to be immediate, and that's a process. And really my goal is as I walk closer and longer with Jesus, my prayer is that I just get quicker and quicker at it. And that's my prayer for you too. But forgiveness and trust are not the same thing. In response to Peter's question, because Jesus always knows that we just need a little more clarity, he goes into a parable. Now, parables are stories that Jesus would tell that would have a spiritual meaning. Usually he's talking about the kingdom of heaven, which is exactly what we see here. He goes this, verse 23. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servant. As he began the settlement, a man who owed him 10,000 bags of gold was brought to him. Since he was not able to pay, the master ordered that he and his wife and his children and all that he had be sold to repay the debt. At this, the servant fell on his knees before him. "Be patient with me," he begged, "and I will pay back everything." The servant's master took pity on him and canceled the debt and let him go. Now, a couple of things that we need to know, because we hear this idea of 10,000 bags of gold, and we're like, well, that's a lot of money. And that's because the actual translation wouldn't make sense to us. But I want to bring clarity to that, because if you know the extreme amount of this cost, you'd know that this is a debt this dude could not pay. See, instead of 10,000 bags of gold, what it's saying is 10,000 talents. Now, 10,000 talents represents one talent being 6,000 denarii. And you're like, man, I didn't know this was going to be a math lesson. Neither did I, but here we are. 6,000 denarii. One denarii represents 1 day's wage. So, he owes the king 60 million days worth of work. That's how many wages. You want to know how many lifetimes that is? Well over 2,000 lifetimes. He'd still be repaying it today. And not even close to paying it all off. Not even close. So what we're seeing here is the extreme amount of money that this man owed. In other words, he couldn't pay the debt. Like, there's no way around it, nothing he could do. He could get his whole family together and say, hey, we're going to spend the rest of our lives, and they'd still not even come close. The debt was unpayable. And you're like, why did he owe the king that much? I don't know. That's probably what happened for the 2007 housing crisis. That's what it looked like. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is that there was this unpayable debt that this man had accrued. And he stands before the king. And he goes, King, I'll pay it back. I'll do whatever I can. I'll make it right, which was impossible. And the king looked at him, had pity on him, and canceled the debt. In other words, he forgave him. See, this posture that this servant has in this moment is meant to be pretty similar to our posture with Jesus. Maybe not the trying to re-earn it thing. He actually tells us we can't and shouldn't try to re-earn it. And yet, we should have this heart posture of humility. Like, man, like I don't deserve this. Like, I deserve punishment. I deserve prison. I deserve chains. And he forgave the debt. You know what happens there is you stop being afraid of the king and you start being grateful for him. You stop being in fear of the debt you owed and start seeing the heart posture of a king who loves you too and calls you son and calls you daughter. And that might shift some things in us. Might lead us to humility in the middle of a conflict. You guys ever struggle with humility in conflict? Where the conflict's brought to you and you're like, you know what? You're the worst. And you start to puff up your chest and you lash out or you wall up and you high road them and pretend like you've got it all together. And we do this especially in resentment. Resentment always is tied to pride. Because you're saying, I am better, more right, more whatever than that person, and they owe me a debt. And we forget that there was an unpayable debt that you owed, an unpayable debt that I owed, that my kids owed, that my wife owed, that the person that you love the most, whatever it is, there was a debt, and the king said, it's been paid on the cross by my son. And if you accept that free gift, you can walk away unchained, unshackled, free from the debt that you once owed. That's the promise of the gospel. And what we see in this, and I think the trap that we fall into is we read this story, and at the beginning of it, if we just stopped right here, you might be like, you know what, I need to be more like the king. I need to forgive all the time. And listen, that's true. Like, we need to be more like the king. But in this story, you're not. I'm not the king in this story. The king is pointing to Jesus. The king is pointing to the one who said, hey, it's paid in full. And here's the kicker with debts. If you know anything about a debt, it's not just canceled. It needs to be owned by someone else. Think about it. Like if you had a loan and they called it forgiven, well, who pays for it? It might be a taxpayer. It might be the lender. It might be somebody. Somebody has to pay the amount that was lost. It's paid by someone. The gospel is the same. There's a debt and you stood before the king and you owed something that you couldn't possibly get past on your own. And he says it's canceled. And what he really means is it's been repurposed on my son. That every sin that you brought in, every spiritual debt that you owe was nailed up on the cross with my son, that he took on the wrath of the Father that you wouldn't have to. That when the Father looks at you, he sees redeemed, restored, made whole. Not by your own merit, not because you worked really hard and paid off a couple life terms, but because Jesus did it for you, the only one who ever could. The debt has been deleted. This is one of the reasons that penance isn't a biblical concept. Because penance is this idea of a repayment plan. Saying, you know what, like Jesus did it, but also I'm gonna do some things to get right in front of God. That's not how the gospel works. The gospel says, paid in full, now respond to it. The gospel says, the chains are off, live free, and don't put chains on anymore. Which means that forgiveness should be a response that we have instantly as we look at the cross and have view of what Christ did. That you and I are responding in freedom to the love that he so freely offered us. The story continues in 28. But when the servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 silver coins. Let's pause there. 100 silver coins, here's what that actually translates to, is 100 denarii. So he owed 100 days worth of work. Now compare that to the 60 million this dude owed. And it's a lot less, not even a fraction. And this servant, he grabbed him and began to choke him. Pay back what you owe me, he demanded. His fellow servant fell to his knees and begged, be patient with me, and I will pay it back. Does that sound familiar? Verse 30. But he refused. Instead, he went off and had the man thrown into prison until he could repay the debt. See, now we're starting to see the hypocrisy. Like now we're starting to see the difference, that we're not the king in this story, we're the unforgiving servant who is so nearsighted that he can't lose sight or he can't see what the king has already done for him. In fact, this is what happens in conflict sometimes. As you do something wrong or dumb or unfaithful or whatever, and you look for somebody else who has wronged you so that you can blame them. This was probably, I can't say for sure, but this is probably the mindset of this unforgiving servant. Man, if this guy paid his debt to me, I wouldn't have owed the king. And if you did the math, that makes no sense. Like if you just looked at it for a half a second, you'd be like, that doesn't even cover a fraction of it. And yet this guy said, hey, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go find that other person who owed me something. See, we get to do the same thing, except hopefully a little bit different. This is one of the issues the world has with Christians, is sometimes our response to conflict is a terrible apologetic for who Jesus is. A terrible representation of who Jesus is. We're meant to provide evidence with our life that Jesus has transformed us. And yet in conflict, we're quick to hold the grudge. In conflict, I'm quick to say, hey, you know what? I'm more right, and I'm going to hold on to this for a couple years. Why? Like, who's held captive by that? Who benefits from that other than your own pride and arrogance? And I know that it's easy to say this from a stage and a lot harder to put into practice, and yet we need to have an awareness on what the King has done on our behalf. See, if I have vision on what Jesus has done for me, then I would hope that that gratitude will translate into how I treat others. And then we get in conflict and we start to see red and we need to be reminded, hold on, it's not about this, it's about I thought that was a cross for a minute. It's about the cross. It's about what Jesus did. It's about him stepping in on my behalf. Why? Because I've been forgiven greatly, which means I'm called to forgive greatly. I'm meant to step out. And look at this punk servant. Like this guy can't get it together. He can't get his eyes off of the fact that he has been wronged and not how greatly he's been forgiven. And so he goes up and he does what we do. He chokes the guy out, or maybe hopefully not. You're here, so you're probably not in jail. If you're watching online from prison, thank you for joining us. But that's probably not the response, and yet it's often what we do. We say, you know what, I'm going to shake you a little bit and say, hey, wake up, you're wrong. And we forget, hold on, I'm the one who's shackled here. I'm the one who needs to offer forgiveness. I'm the one who Jesus stepped on the cross for. I'm the one that needs to get my side of the road clear. So what we see here is this servant seeks out the other servant. Like, it's not like he stumbled his way into the marketplace and just saw him. It says he went and he found a man who owed him money, and we do the same. Conflict is not meant to lead into more conflict. Stop tying them together. We do this in marriage all the time, where you've got a conflict about the dishes and somehow you make it about parenting. You know what I'm talking about? Like you've got a conflict over here, and you say, why not just put them all in? And we've got this ledger of all the things that your spouse has done wrong, and you forget that they could hold up a ledger too. And the beauty is that Jesus had a ledger, and he put it on the cross, and he's put it to shreds on your behalf. Stop holding ledgers. You're a terrible bookkeeper. You're not meant to hold the grudge. You're meant to hold out your arms in forgiveness. You're meant to invite them in and let go of the stones that you've held on to. Like, that's supposed to translate into your marriage, not be in spite of your marriage. You're meant to forgive your spouse. Because listen, if there's one place I know you're going to have the most conflict, it's in your marriage. If you're not married yet, I'm sorry to ruin the illusion. It doesn't solve your problems, right? Like and yet, if you fight through the conflict, if you both say, hey, I don't want victory, I want unity, and I'm going to offer forgiveness, abounding forgiveness, 77 times, like I'm going to press in with you. You know how deep and abiding that relationship can become? It's beautiful. It's meant to look like the gospel. People are meant to look at your marriage and say, wow, I can't believe she's with you. And you go, I know. I'm messed up, but man, look at the grace she offers me. They might say it to her, but I married out of my league, so maybe that's just me. I know. She's not here, so I can say whatever I want. The point is, like, marriage is meant to be a picture of the gospel, and yet so often it's that upside-down kingdom, or right-side-up kingdom. You know what I mean? Like, it looks a whole lot more like Cain and Lamech than it does Jesus and Peter. But what if it was different? What if you said, hey, you know what, I'm done with this grudge that I've been holding. And you're like, I don't know if my spouse is going to let go of that grudge. Doesn't matter. They're not the point. You've got chains on your wrist. Time to live free. Deal with your part. Offer forgiveness. Love them well and pursue them in unity. See, this unforgiving servant has this debt forgiven to him, and he forgets all about it. The gratitude has washed away, and he is all about doing what he wants and doing it now. So he's trying to get this debt repaid to him after having his whole loan forgiven. And here's what we're seeing here is a really good mindset, or at least a mindset shift we need to have, because we think that every time we've got conflict, we need to bring it directly to that person. And maybe that's true. Like, maybe he did need to go to that other servant and say, hey, your debt is forgiven, but maybe not. See, there's this mindset of, well, if I forgive them, I have to tell them that I forgave them. And sometimes that is very true. Like, if the conflict is front of mind and if they have openly wronged you and they know you're hurt, sometimes that conversation is beautiful. But I've seen this done as a weapon too. I had a conflict back when I was a little baby Christian. Still trying to figure this thing out. Still am. And I navigated it as faithfully as I knew how. If I could go back, there are things that I would very clearly do differently, and yet I really did try to be faithful in this conflict. And it kind of left where we parted ways, but I felt like it had been resolved. And then 5 years later, I got an email, and the email goes, I forgive you, go be free. And my flesh wanted to say, I had no idea I was held captive. But that wouldn't have been a kind, and really wrestled. I brought it to Jenny, and I was like, hey, I need some of your discernment because I'm struggling with how to respond. And we landed on like, hey, I don't need to respond. There's actually nothing that I could do that would actually help that person feel loved. So I can just make sure I continually cancel the debt. That's one of the struggles with forgiveness is it's not just a one and done deal. You ever have that where you're like, I forgave them, and the next morning you're like, they're the worst. Right? Like it's an ongoing process, but here's what we're not meant to do. You're not meant to use your forgiveness as a sword. You're not meant to go, hey, go on, be free. First of all, I wasn't held captive. That person was. And if I actually took a step back and I really tried to, it wasn't anger that needed to boil up in me. It was heartbreak. So this person for 5 years has been wrestling with this thing that I thought was long dealt with. Like, that's a conviction for me of like, man, like how can I navigate this better in the future? Like, how can I make sure that I'm doing my part? I can't lead them to forgive me. I can't do their part for them, and yet I can do my part and do my part well. And if I do, it might help them do theirs. See, when we navigate conflict, we need to do something that I call forgive first. When you're engaging, rather than using your forgiveness as a sword, before you engage in the conflict conversation, in the aftermath of the initial conflict, but you've still got that resentment brewing, forgive first. In your marriages, here's the deal. Before you address the conflict, forgive them first. And you go, but they haven't said sorry to me yet. I know. Forgive them first. Your forgiveness is meant to flow from the cross, not from their apology. Like, you're meant to press in love, not just respond to the love that you've received, which means that we're meant to forgive first. I got into a little bit of trouble when we first were married. I had this practice that I thought was good, and I had a good heart posture with it, but it wasn't great. Here's how it looked. Is we would get in conflict, because that happens with pastors too, and we'd have this tiff or whatever, and eventually Jenny would ask for forgiveness, and I did something wrong and asked for forgiveness too, but she asked for forgiveness, and my response was, I've already forgiven you. Not a good move, husbands, because here's what she heard, and eventually she brought this to me, and I haven't said it to her since. She said, hey, I know your heart posture is that you love me and you care about me, but what I hear is that you're holier than me. And so rather than saying it, why don't you just practice it? See, if we practice forgiveness humbly and quietly, it's going to help other people feel loved, cared for, and maybe even do their part too. And it sounds great on paper, but when you put it into practice and you shred the ledger, and they've got this whole ledger against you and they keep using it, you just got to know it's not a one-time deal. It's an ongoing conversation, ongoing love that you offer, ongoing forgiveness that you need to give them. And as you model it, my prayer is that they experience the grace of the cross, that they experience what Jesus did, and they stop being that unforgiving servant, but they start to tear up their ledger too. They might not ever do that. They might not. That's the risk with this. And yet I just got to let you know, Jesus didn't flinch. Like, when Jesus put himself up on a cross, he didn't go, but some people are going to reject me. He just did it. He said, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. And he offered forgiveness in spite of our own actions. You want to know what that looks like? It looks like him creating us from dirt and us spitting in his face. And Jesus going, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. We have all received. If you are a follower of Jesus, if you've placed your faith in him, you have received that type of canceled debt. And let's not lose sight of that. See, when the conflict gets hard and we get angry and we get puffed up and we build walls and we got the archers on the tower and the moat nice and built, maybe you fill the moat with alligators, which they're probably not going to survive. Moats are pretty gross, but it's fine. And we think that we're in these just better positions. We've lost sight of the king that we serve. Jesus didn't serve a kingdom with walls. He tore all the walls down. Do you know what he did? Like, the people of Israel were the Israelites, the people of the Old Testament. You had to be born into it. And if you weren't born into it, there was a long process you had to go through, and even then you weren't viewed as made right in the eyes of God. That was the process before. And Jesus said, I'm tearing all the walls down. You've got access. It was like an Oprah show. You've got access. You've got access. Everyone's got access. Why? Because of what you did? No. Because of what he did. Let's not lose sight of that. If I navigate my conflict through the lens of the cross, I'll be unoffendable. I'll have incredibly thick skin because I love them more than they love me. I'll care more about them than how they're not caring for me. I'll use my words. I'll put my words on a leash that I'll speak slowly. And when I do speak, I'm going to speak in love. It's going to lead me to behave a certain way, to go ahead and care for that person and shepherd their hearts. And it's going to lead me not to hold the grudge. Because my ledger has been shredded by the King of the universe. So I don't hold ledgers anymore. Verse 31. It says, when the other servants saw what had happened, they were outraged and went and told their master everything that had happened. Then the master called the servant in. You wicked servant, he said, I canceled all that debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you? In anger, his master handed over him to the jailers to be tortured until he should repay back all that he owed. This is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother or sister from your heart. And we go, well, that sounds really harsh, Lord. That's because it is. See, we've got a choice. We can accept what Jesus did on the cross and respond to it, or we can deny what he did on the cross. And that's meant to translate into the way that we care for others. If you read 1 John, this is a key theme of 1 John, where it's like, hey, if you forgive your brother or sister who has sinned against you, the king is in you. And if you do not, you remain apart from what he did. Like you and I, we're meant to respond to this. And we go, wait, I thought anger wasn't a good thing. Well, our anger is not. James 1, like human anger does not produce the righteousness of God, but you know whose anger does? The one who is judge and has authority. Your wrath doesn't do it. You don't get it. Your vengeance doesn't do it. You don't get to have that either. Your justice, we turn into Batman all the time. I want justice. No, you don't. No, I don't. That's the beauty of grace. Like grace is that life isn't fair and we don't want it to be. Because fair ends with chains on our wrists. And the king says, go out and be free. So here's my ask. As you carry your chains into this room, as you come in shackled, because most of us have someone who is especially hard to love. And maybe that someone is someone that you've been holding a grudge against. Maybe you've built up nice big walls and said, hey, I'll stay over here. Maybe you've got that resentment that's festering inside of you that when they call or when they even speak to you, it doesn't even matter what they say. You've already decided what they're going to say and you're already angry about it. Maybe it's that person that you're driving in your car and you're supposed to be listening to worship music, but you forgot to do that because you've got an argument going on in your head and you dominated them. They didn't even stand a chance. Hashtag they weren't there. What is that resentment for you? See, here's what I want us to do. I want us to take this song of response and to get so practical it hurts. I want to say this isn't just a series that we were in one time, but this is a chance for us to press out and put it into practice. For us to say, I am done with the resentment game because I have been forgiven greatly. I see what the king has done for me, and I want to be a part of that upside-down kingdom, not the kingdom of Lamech. I'm not going to talk about myself in third person anymore. If you do that, please stop. Instead, I'm going to press into Jesus. And I'm going to press into forgiveness I've received. And I'm going to respond to that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start canceling all the debts around me. And they might know about it. They might not know about it. It doesn't matter to me. What they're going to know is that they're loved. That my life is a 180 life that represents the king that I follow. And he is worthy of my praise. And my praise looks a whole lot like freedom. And my freedom looks a whole lot like not having resentments. Take this song. Bring the resentment to him and say, God, help me to forgive. You can't do it on your own. You weren't going to be able to forgive that debt unless he first did it to you. But now we can. And he helps us. Would you pray with me? Jesus, I know I get fired up sometimes. And so, Lord, if I got in the way of this message, please just remove the roadblocks. I ask that you soften our hearts. God, I see marriages that are struggling right now. I see friends who are struggling right now because they're holding on to things that they should just let go of. God, you went on the cross for me. I don't want to lose sight of that. You went on the cross for them. Don't let them lose sight of that, Lord. I can't imagine the weight of your son going up there. think about my kids and how desperately I want to protect them from the world. And Jesus, you went up on the cross to pay our debt. Help us not to forget that you paid theirs too. Help us not to forget that you love them too, that they're meant to be called brothers and sisters, that we are meant to do this life thing together, and that we're meant to shepherd them into the type of gratitude that we get to experience right now. Wake up our hearts. Resentment has no business in your kingdom. Let it die and be buried in the tomb. But because you stepped out of that tomb, we're going to step out now, shackle free, chains free, ready to walk in freedom with the King of the universe who calls us redeemed and restored. God, you are good, you are beautiful, you are mighty, and we give you all the praise and all the glory because we are free, and so can they be. In your name, amen.